Well, thanks so much to Karen, and hasn't Karen done a terrific job tonight? Karen's talked about the passion. You've got it, and we love it. Thank you so much. And isn't it great? We have a coalition for marriage. And here we are at a very special event tonight. We were there last night in Launceston, the northern part of Tasmania, and tonight I'm sure will be almost as good, spoken by a real northerner. There you go. But ladies and gentlemen, to my, Your Grace, Julian Porteous, Campbell Markham, friend and colleague, to James Parker, who you've heard that amazing story, and you'll go a long way to hear a story like that, punchy and passionate. I want to acknowledge also my dear colleague and friend, Jackie Petrusma, who's sitting with me right down there in the front row. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to stand here tonight and make it very clear that I'm in favour of marriage and to say it is okay to say no. I say that in the context of the marriage debate, which in recent times has been held in a hothouse of toxicity and intolerance. Many ordinary Tasmanians, like yourselves, who have long supported marriage, or even others who've questioned the strident and a very strong campaign for same-sex marriage, they feel intimidated. They feel unwilling to express their views. Fair-minded Tasmanians, sadly, are feeling uncomfortable. Those that are willing to stand up for marriage and express their views have been ridiculed and, sadly, sometimes abused. In fact, some hotels who've taken bookings for pro-marriage groups, they've been boycotted, subject to ferocious hate call campaigns. Individuals and businesses have been bullied into silence, and offices have been vandalised. And as it was referred to earlier, even our national carrier Qantas has been flexing its wings in an act of intimidation. So surely we should approach this debate with respect and compassion for one another. Surely in modern day Australia we can agree to disagree, and that is a hallmark of a mature democracy. And all people, no matter what colour, no matter what sexual preference, no matter what religious faith, no matter if no faith at all, surely we should treat each other with respect. So tonight I want to assure each and every one of you that your views are important. Your views are worthy. And I encourage you to express them. Today is a milestone event with the High Court deciding that the plebiscite will go on. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for you to stand up and express your views. Although you may be ridiculed or intimidated, it is time. As Campbell said, there's no better time to be a Christian than to be a Christian in Tasmania and across this great, wonderful country, Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, I quote from the former Prime Minister John Howard just recently when he said there is nothing homophobic about supporting traditional marriage. There is nothing bigoted about believing in marriage, which is a bedrock institution that's been around for thousands of years, across religions, across cultures. There is no better institution than marriage to work in the best interests of our children. It's an umbrella under which children can grow and be nurtured. There is no institution, there is nothing that has come before us as human beings that can better protect or maximise the best interests of our children. It just hasn't happened. It's called marriage. It's between between a man and a woman, and it's marriage. Colleagues and friends, I was chair of a Senate committee in 2011. It was on donor conception practices in Australia. As I sat there, before me were several donor-conceived individuals, and they told their story, a very personal story of their search for the identity of not just their mother but their father. And you could see the pain and the suffering and the anguish in their eyes as they told their stories. It's right, and I believe it should be a reasonable expectation of every child that comes into the world to have that right to both a mum and a dad. And sadly, same-sex marriage denies a child that right. Ladies and gentlemen, so far in the marriage debate it's been very adult-centred. It hasn't been focused on the rights of the child or what's in the best interests of a child. So to suggest that turning the institution of marriage, which has been round for a millennia, to turn it on its head, to suggest that it will have no consequences or little consequence is patently ridiculous. And let me just say that that proposition flies in the face of the evidence put by the Department of the Attorney-General just recently. I'm advised they said that it will require 60 changes to 25 federal pieces of legislation, not to mention a whole range of pieces of state legislation all around the country. In addition, it flies in the face of the evidence from overseas countries where same-sex marriage has been legalised. And remember that of the 200 countries of the world, only 25 countries have legalised same-sex marriage, albeit most of them Western countries. So not 20%, around about 15 or even less than that to date. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, it was only 13 years ago in 2004 that both the Coalition and the Labor Party unanimously supported in the federal parliament the decision to codify in law marriages between a man and a woman. And a key reason for that legislation, ladies and gentlemen, was set out in a letter dated the 31st of March, and it was authored, in fact, by myself, signed by 30 Coalition MPs, and the first 3 paragraphs of that letter read as follows. Dear Prime Minister, we write to seek your support to codify in legislation the current common law definition of marriage. There is growing evidence to suggest that this definition, the union of a man and a woman to the exclusion of all others voluntarily entered into for life, is under threat. We believe that if this current workable definition is successfully challenged, the great value of the institution of marriage to our culture and society, and particularly to children, will be irreversibly diminished. And that was taken on board, obviously, by the Prime Minister, John Howard, and the Cabinet and the Coalition at the time, and in August 2004, with the support, the wholehearted, unanimous support of the Coalition and the Labor Party, that legislation was made law. It codified what was commonly understood not just for weeks and months and years, but for decades, for hundreds of years, for thousands of years, codified in law in 2004. And of course, both major parties held those positions through to, in fact, 2010. Both major parties went to the election confirming marriage between a man and a woman. And it wasn't until December 2011 that the Federal Labor Party changed their mind and did a switch at the December 2011 National Conference to say that they supported same-sex marriage. So that's only a few short 6 years ago. Amazing how times can change so quickly, as His Grace indicated in his address earlier. So, ladies and gentlemen, why does Labor now effectively ban its members from holding that same view it pronounced just 6 years ago? Why has the gay lobby been so strident and demanding in their attempts to redefine the institution of marriage? And as James said, and I believe, there is another agenda at play. And I'm reminded of the comments of lesbian political activist Marcia Gesson, who told the 2012 Sydney Writers' Festival, and this is what she said, and I quote, Fighting for gay marriage generally involves lying about what we are going to do with marriage when we get there, because we lie that the institution of marriage is not going to change, and that is a lie. So the onus is on those arguing for change to come clean and tell the whole story, because the experience from overseas tells us that same-sex marriage is just the beginning. It is just the beginning. The beginning of the erosion of parental rights, the beginning of inappropriate sex education in schools, the beginning of the loss of our freedom to speak, to act in accordance with our conscience or our religious or Christian faith. So across the Western world, individuals have been fined, fired, denied business or employment, forced to resign, or even prosecuted for not agreeing with this new definition of marriage. So there's no reason to think that this same consequence and concerns will not happen here in Tasmania or the great country of Australia. And we've already seen, haven't we, the chilling effect of the gay lobby's campaign on free speech and freedom of conscience. And we've heard from Archbishop Julian Porteous tonight, who was hauled before a government tribunal for allegedly breaching the law and our discrimination laws for sharing the church's teaching that's been understood for hundreds and thousands of years on marriage as between a man and a woman, and sharing that view with Catholic schools and Catholic churches and the like around Tasmania. And sad to say, the Archbishop's experience has not been an isolated case, because we've heard from Campbell Markham tonight, a Presbyterian pastor here in Hobart who's targeted for writing a blog in 2011, today 2017, for writing a blog in 2011 in support of his views on marriage. So when is enough enough? Ladies and gentlemen, of course, just past week, I was recently and just shocked to hear of the campaign to deregister Dr. Pansy Lai, a Sydney doctor who appeared in the pro-marriage, man-woman marriage advertisement, which I'm sure some of you would have seen on the television already or on social media. Threatening another's livelihood simply because of their view on marriage is un-Australian. And I don't say that lightly. I say it sincerely and strongly. That is wrong. It's so wrong it shows contempt for free speech and freedom of conscience. It's time to stand up. Sadly, the petition was removed following dozens and dozens of complaints. But this is happening in Australia, and it's happening now. It's happening now. When man-woman marriage is the law of the land, what can we expect when same-sex marriage could be legalised? Ladies and gentlemen, the law has an educative role. The law sets standards that we must keep. It sets directions we must follow. It sets guidelines on how we should live our lives in a compassionate, caring, loving community. And that's, of course, right and proper, that the law does have an educative role. So I ask this question: what will be taught in our schools? What will be taught in our schools? Of course, what is taught in our schools should clearly reflect the law of the land. So if the law of the land is changed to legalise same-sex marriage, schools will be obliged to teach gay and lesbian sexual activity in the classroom. Once gender is removed from our marriage laws, it will quickly be removed from our classrooms. It will happen. It's already occurring in other countries which have legalised same-sex marriage. It's even happening in our own country of Australia, in the state of Victoria, where the so-called Safe Schools program has been promoted, where they promote gender fluidity. Some of you in the room may not be aware or familiar with those terms. Well, Be prepared. It's about to unleash on you and on us as a community gender fluidity, gender neutrality. This is a new world we're about to enter. The male and female, the complementary nature where we are equal but work together. The biological necessity of having a mum and a dad to procreate life. This is going out the door under a new world where gender fluidity and gender neutrality will be the supremo. And what about parents? The parents of our dear children. What about the parents? Are you in favour of your kids being exposed to this material in our schools, Tasmania or elsewhere in this great country? What about your right to be informed before this information and education material is provided to your children? What about your right to say, no, that's not right for my child, for my children? Be assured that those rights will either be severely reduced or removed altogether. It's happening in other countries where same-sex marriage has been legalised. Parents have found themselves in court for trying to remove their children from radical sex education classes. Now, disappointingly, the federal opposition and others have already pledged to oppose any attempts to provide exemptions in our laws to allow people to believe in man-woman relationships, in man-woman marriage, or indeed to live according to their conscience and religious beliefs. And it seems to me that these self-declared proponents of tolerance have in fact become the advocates of intolerance, sadly. If these protections are not maintained, ordinary Tasmanians in Christian or faith-based schools, hospitals, or welfare agencies may be forced to act against their conscience. The ramifications, the consequences of turning on its head the institution of marriage is massive and detrimental. We should all be fully aware of that. I recognise the wonderful work of our welfare services and the Christian and faith-based welfare services. More than half of those services are meted out in Tasmania by those Christian or faith-based organisations. Some of you tonight might be volunteers or work in those wonderful organisations. Those organisations and their future is at risk. And I'm very, very concerned on their behalf and on behalf of the state of Tasmania. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say it's terrific that we have a coalition for marriage, and say congratulations to all those that have been involved in getting behind it to create a special event tonight, which is a milestone event on this special day. And I've been asked to officially launch the campaign from here on in because it's time. As I referred to the importance of a mature democracy, the best form of democracy is a participatory democracy where men and women, young and old, are involved. It's time, ladies and gentlemen, to stand up, to get involved and to say no, to share the word, to express your views, even though it might be tough, even though there may be howls or intimidation or ridicule. It's time to say no. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would say saying no is the right thing to do for our children. It's the right thing to do for our state. It's the right thing to do for our future. And I officially launch all those that are going to be involved in this campaign, all the volunteers, to get up and have a go. I say, let's do it. Let's say no.